Some of these hides would allow for the stowage of nothing more than a pistol. Others were bigger, maybe the size of a submachine gun with a folded stock and a few extra magazines. All in all, maintenance crew found nearly 10 cubic feet of nearly perfect hiding places, enough to transport a fair amount of gear covertly wherever and whenever the campus needed to move items surreptitiously. Pistols, rifles, explosives, surveillance equipment that would have sent foreign customs agents into seizures, documents, money, anything that Jerry Henley's men needed to do their work. Henley hired a flight crew of 3, all ex-military and vetted for campus operations. The lead pilot was from the Air Force, which would have surprised no one. The fact that she was female should not have surprised anyone either. She was 50-year-old Captain Helen Reed, a former B-1B pilot who made the jump into corporate jets by taking a job at Gulfstream. She had been on the G650 project as a test pilot, but she didn't seem to mind slumming by flying the G550 instead. Her first officer was Chester Hicks, but everyone still called him by his call sign of Country because it was pronounced Southern drawl. He was an ex-Marine Corps aviator from Kentucky who'd flown rotary and fixed-wing aircraft in the Corps. He spent the last 6 years of his career training young pilots at Naval Air Station Corpus Christi, piloting B-12 Huron multi-engine aircraft before retiring and going into business aviation. He'd flown G500s and G550s for a decade. Henley had surprised the 5 operators at the campus back in June by taking them on their first ride in the G550. They'd driven to BWI through the gate of an FBO called Greater Maryland Charter Aviation Services, which was run by a friend of Jerry Henley's. Jerry's FBO-owning friend allowed Henley's aircraft and his employees to avoid virtually all scrutiny. On this first flight, the 6 men had boarded their new plane, and Jerry introduced everyone to Captain Reed and Country, and then Henley introduced them to their flight attendant. Adara Sherman was an attractive 35-year-old with short white blonde hair and bright gray eyes that she kept behind serious glasses. She wore a blue uniform with no insignia, and she always kept her jacket on. Sherman had spent 9 years in the Navy, and she looked like she had not let her physical training slack in the least since leaving the service. She was polite and professional as she showed the men around the cabin for a 1-hour flight that would have them circling the area and then performing a touch and go in Manassas before returning to BWI. As Jack sipped his wine over the Atlantic, he thought back to that day, and it made him chuckle. During takeoff, while Adara Sherman was out of earshot, Jerry Henley had addressed the 3 single men in the cabin. "We're going to play a word association game, gentlemen. Our flight attendant is Adara Sherman. I want you to think of her as General Sherman, and think of yourselves as Atlanta. Got it?" "Keep it businesslike," Sammett said with a slight smile. "You got it." Caruso nodded obediently, but Jack spoke up. "You know me, Jerry." "I do, and you are a good man. I also know what it's like being 26 years old. I'll just leave it there, okay?" "I understand. The flight attendant is a no-fly zone." All the men had laughed just as